take my shoes off. They're hurting my foot. Oops. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting set up, everything set up, and then we shall get started. Like I said, just getting set up, and then we'll be ready to roll. This is the true crime segment that I'm going to be doing on Jeffery Dahmer. Get there in just a second here. And, okay, true crime. We love true crime. Just kidding. We don't love true crime. Don't love true crime. Crime is bad. Don't do bad things, guys. Don't do bad things. Hi, wifey. Okay. Whoop, we got notes. We got notes. I love true crime stories. But crime is bad, and I have to say that because otherwise TikTok and Facebook and probably YouTube will yell at me. So just a fair warning, today there's a disclaimer. It gets graphic, it gets violent. We're talking about cannibalism and murder. Also, to protect my own well-being, because as I have said during lives where I've been working on this segment, people are being sued for using his victims' names, so we are staying away from using names as much as humanly possible. So to start off this segment, we're starting with Jeffery Dahmer, the gay cannibal. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960. He was also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster. He was an American serial killer and sex offender who committed the murders and dismemberment of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. Many of his later murders involved necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts. He was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder. Dahmer was found to be legally sane at his trial, and he was convicted of 15 of the 16 murders he had committed in Wisconsin, and was sentenced to 15 terms of life imprisonment on February 17th of 1992. Dahmer was later sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment for an additional homicide committed in Ohio in 1978. Which I find is very interesting, because that's where I'm from. On November 28th, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Washington. He was the first of two sons of Joyce Annette, a teletype machine instructor, and Lionel Herbert Dahmer, a Marquette University chemistry student, and later a research chemist, which is actually going to play a part in like his later commission of crimes and stuff. Some sources report Dahmer was deprived of attention as an infant, but other sources say that Dahmer was generally doted on as an infant and toddler by both parents. However, his mother was a hypochondriac and demanded a lot of time and attention from her husband. She was always sick, in other words. in elementary school, Dahmer was quiet and timid, and one of his teachers later recollected she detected early signs of abandonment. However, he did have a small group of friends. Really, I couldn't find any more information on his friends or whether or not he continued to have successful friendships, but it just seems like he was always looking for companionship, is what the teachers were saying. In October of 1966, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio. When Joyce gave birth in December, Jeffrey was allowed to name his baby brother, choosing the name of David. From an early age, Dahmer manifested an interest in dead animals, which is like the biggest sign of like serial killers is killing animals or hurting animals. And yeah, his fascination with dead animals may have begun at the age of 4 when he saw his father removing animal bones from beneath the family home. It was said that he would often go searching under the family's home or in like barns and stuff for like dead animals and their like remains, like the carcasses and the bones of these animals. To each their own, I guess. In 1968, the family moved to Bath Township, Summit County, Ohio. This address was their third in 2 years, and the Dahmer's 6th since marriage. Apparently, his mother had this, like, really big issue of just not being able to be stable. She moved around a lot, which, I mean, I know people who have done that, and, like, if you're trying to escape something, like, I could see that, but there was no evidence that she was being, like, abused or anything as a child or had multiple relationships or anything that she seemed to be running from. She just wasn't stable. She wasn't all there. 2 years later, Dahmer expressed an interest in bleaching bones, and his father, who thought he was expressing scientific curiosity, demonstrated how to safely bleach and preserve animal bones. The same year, Joyce began increasing her daily consumption of Equinil, which from what I understand is kind of similar. It's kind of similar to our NyQuil. What is the matter?
She want to fight people.
Who?
Nebula.
She being mean to Panda Bear?
No? She don't know they're trying to fight James.
Oh.
Beat your ass.
The same year, Joyce began increasing her daily consumption of Equinol, laxatives, and sleeping pills, further minimizing her tangible contact with her husband and children. And they say that this is when Jeffrey started to exhibit even bigger signs of abandonment and lack of maternal attachment. By the age of 14, Dahmer was seen as an outcast and had begun drinking beer and hard alcohol in daylight hours, frequently concealing his liquor inside the jacket he wore to school. So he was drinking at his high school, basically, is what they're saying. Although largely uncommunicative, in his freshman year, he was seen by staff as polite and highly intelligent, but with average grades, which, you know, if he was as intelligent as they're saying he was, because I read some reports that said he was like genius level intelligent, and if that's the case, then his grades could have been an issue because he was like bored with like the curriculum. Because I have seen some like genius people that I know that like they just don't do well in school because they already know how to do the stuff they're being taught and they're just bored with it, basically. When he hit puberty, Dahmer discovered that he was gay. Same. Same. In his early teens, he had a brief relationship with another teenage boy, although they never had intercourse. By Dahmer's later admission, he began fascinating about dominating and controlling a completely submissive male partner in his early to mid-teens. On one occasion, Dahmer concealed himself in bushes with a baseball bat to lie in wait for this one particular jogger that he would see every day and had just kind of become obsessed with. However, he did not pass by on that particular day, and Dahmer later said this was his first attempt to attack someone. I mean, so he's relatively young, and he started out relatively young. By 1977, Dahmer's grades had declined. His parents hired a private tutor with limited success. When Lionel discovered Joyce had engaged in a brief affair in September 1977, they both decided to divorce, telling their sons they wished to do so amicably. I mean, if you can do that, more power to you. In May 1978, Dahmer graduated from high school. A few weeks before his graduation, one of his teachers observed Dahmer sitting close to the school parking lot drinking several cans of beer. That spring, Joyce and David moved out of the family home to live with relatives in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. I always want to say Chippewa County because I think we have a Chippewa County in Ohio, so I always want to say that. Dahmer had just turned 18 and remained in the family home alone. And this was just not good for him. It was just not good for him. Dahmer's parents' divorce was finalized on July 24th, 1978. Joyce was awarded custody of their younger son and alimony payments. And obviously nobody got custody of Jeffrey because Jeffrey was 18 and, you know, he was kind of allowed to just be on his own. I mean, he was legally an adult. So Dahmer committed his first murder in 1978, 3 weeks after his high school graduation. On June 18th, Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker who was almost 19. He lured the youth to his house on the pretext of drinking. The victim, who had been hitchhiking to a rock concert at Chippewa Lake Park, agreed to accompany Dahmer to his house upon the promise of a few beers with Dahmer as he had the house to himself. That he did. After several hours of talking and drinking and listening to music, the victim wanted to leave, but Dahmer said he didn't want him to, so he bludgeoned him with a 10-pound dumbbell. This makes me worry about keeping, like, workout equipment in the house, because, like, if you research true crime as much as I do and you do these segments, you, like, think of all the things in your house that, like, other people have been murdered with, and you're just like, we shouldn't have that here. We don't need that here. He later stated he struck the victim with the dumbbell as the victim sat in a chair. Again, for anybody who's just now joining, yes, it will continue to be just the victim or the victims. I'm not using names out of respect for family members that have stated that they do not want their children's names used. Normally, I try to use first names more so than last names because I feel like it's dehumanizing them otherwise, but this time we're not using names at all. So when he fell unconscious to the ground, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripped the clothes off his body before exploring his chest and then masturbating as he stood over the corpse. Dahmer had issues, that's for sure. He was a little messed up. He was a lot messed up. Not just a little, he was a lot messed up. The following day, Dahmer dissected his body in his basement, then he later buried the remains in a shallow grave in his backyard. 6 weeks after the murder, Jeff's dad and his fiancée returned to the house to discover Dahmer was there by himself. That August, Dahmer enrolled in Ohio State University, hoping to major in business. Honestly, I feel like when you read things like these serial killers, like, that go to, like, college, like Ted Bundy went to law school, like, I don't know, it's just weird because it makes you never think of that university in a good light again, because now it's, like, associated with some evil psycho. You know what I mean? It's just how my brain works, but yeah. So he was hoping to major in business, but was completely unproductive, largely because of his persistent alcohol abuse. Despite his father having paid in advance for his second term, he dropped out after just 3 months. Now, from what I could find on this particular subject, he was literally failing every subject. He wasn't even attempting to, like, do the work and get good grades. So, in January of 1979, Dahmer enlisted in the United States Army, where he trained as a medical specialist at Fort Sam Houston and San Antonio, Texas. Now, I've never been in the military. There's only a couple people I know that have been in the military. Unfortunately, they are both no longer with us. So, if you have been in the military or know somebody in the military, I am very curious about this. Do you have to have medical training to be a medical specialist in the military? Because if not, I don't understand how he could have been a medical specialist with no medical training. Does that make sense? Like, I have some questions about that one. So on November 20th, 1987, Dahmer encountered a 25-year-old man from Ontonagon, God forgive me if I didn't say that right, Michigan, at a bar and persuaded him to return to the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Dahmer had rented a room for the evening. According to Dahmer, he had no intention of murdering the victim, but rather intending to simply drug him and lie beside him as he explored his body. The following morning, however, Dahmer awoke to find the victim lying beneath him on the bed, his chest crushed in and black and blue with bruises. Blood was also seeping from the corner of his mouth, and Dahmer's fist and one forearm were extensively bruised. Dahmer stated he had no memory of having killed him. And this is, like, super important later when we get into, like, the trial and conviction part, that he could not remember killing him because You'll find out. You'll find out. To dispose of the victim's body, Dahmer purchased a large suitcase in which he transported the body to his grandmother's residence, which is where he was living. There, 1 week later, he severed the head, arms, and legs from the torso, then filleted the bones from his body before cutting the flesh into pieces small enough to handle. Dahmer then placed the flesh inside plastic garbage bags. He wrapped the bones inside a sheet and pounded them into splinters with a sledgehammer. The entire dismemberment process took Dahmer approximately 2 hours to complete, and he disposed of all of the victim's remains, excluding the head, in the trash. Now, I find it very interesting that he was living with his grandmother when he first started committing crimes, because I don't understand how she could not have questioned, say, the foul odor coming from bodies. Like, if he waited a week to dismember this body, it's decomposing. So there's going to be a smell to it. Like, why would you not question what that is? Also, why was there never any question of why these men came to her home but never seemed to leave? Like, what was your excuse for this? Because how did you not know? Like, it's different, I think, for me, like, when I talk, like, about BTK or somebody, because he went to these people's homes and committed the murders. These are people he brought home with him and murdered in, like, his grandmother's home. So I feel like there's a little bit of a difference of not noticing if your husband was home late that night or on time versus them actually being killed in your house and you saying that you had no idea. Like, how did you not know? You know what I mean? For 2 weeks after the victim's murder, Dahmer retained his head wrapped in a blanket. After 2 weeks, Dahmer boiled the head in a mixture of Soilex, an alkali-based industrial detergent, and bleach in an effort to retain the skull, which he used for nefarious purposes. You should know what that is. 2 months after the murder, Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old Native American male prostitute. Dahmer lured the youth to his home with an offer of $50 to pose for nude pictures. Now, you have to remember that this takes place in, like, the 70s. So $50 back then was a lot of money. I think what I read said it was, like, an equivalent of, like, $500 today or something. It'll be fine. So the pair engaged in sexual activity before Dahmer drugged the victim and strangled him on the cellar floor. Dahmer left the body in the cellar for 1 week before dismembering it in much the same manner as he had with previous victims. The skull was boiled and cleansed in bleach while the other remains were in the trash. Give me a second. I gotta block somebody because we already having issues with men. Like, y'all bear with me. He thinks he did something, but we need to get that out of here because we don't do that shit. On March 24th, 1988, Dahmer met a 22-year-old bisexual man outside a gay bar called the Phoenix. Dahmer lured him to his grandmother's residence. Although the incentive on this occasion was $50 to simply spend the remainder of the night with him. He then drugged him with sleeping pills and strangled him with a leather strap, with Dahmer then performing oral sex on the corpse. Dahmer dismembered his body within 24 hours of murdering him. That's, I don't know, there's all kinds of... Dude, I have blocked this person like 3 times. Just leave. Okay, so apparently I need to take a minute and say this. I will not have you disrespecting me or idolizing the killers or disrespecting victims across any fucking platform. I will block you. I don't care who the fuck you are or how important you think you are. Because that's not gonna fly. I don't do this for you guys to be nasty to the people who died or the loved ones of the people who died. It happened. We are not idolizing the serial killers and we are not hurting the victims or the victims' loved ones. I will block you. I do not give a shit. I can't have that. It's just not cool. In September of 1988, Dahmer's grandmother asked him to move out, largely because of his drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her home. So this is where I was, like, sketchy about it, because I'm like, so you did notice that these guys were coming to your home, but you didn't question the fact that they never seemed to leave. And also, she brought up his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night and the foul smells occasionally emanating from both the basement and the garage. So, you've seen the guys come to your house. You've not seen them leave. You have concerns about a smell in your basement. And you were just like, hey, can you move out? We're not going to ask any questions about maybe why. Like, I just feel like there's just so many more questions that you should be asking. And yes, I realize to some of you my makeup looks really dark, and some of you it looks really light, which makes my coloring look off. It's just the lighting in the room. I've tried to fix it multiple times and can't get it to cooperate, so it is what it is. Dahmer found a one-bedroom apartment and moved in on September 25th, 2 days later, because Milwaukee fucking sucks. He was arrested for drugging and sexually fondling a 13-year-old boy whom he had lured on the pretext of posing nude for photographs. On January 3rd, 1989, he pled guilty to the charges of second-degree sexual assault and of enticing a child for immoral purposes. Now, I would love for this to be the end of the story and be like, he was caught, end of story, yay! Of course, we all know that that's not what happened, because for some reason, police in the 70s just fucking sucked, I guess. I don't know. No offense, Milwaukee police officers. 2 months after his conviction and 2 months prior to his sentencing, he murdered his 5th victim. Also, I'm just saying, the victim that he was pled guilty to assaulting was 13 years old. Why the fuck is this dude just walking around able to kill other people? Like, is there not, like, a rule that if you molest children, you're not supposed to be just, I don't know, fucking walking around? Is that not a thing back then? I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 70s. My wife was. But I wasn't. A mixed race, he killed his 5th victim, a mixed race 24-year-old male model whom Dahmer met at a gay bar on March 25th, 1989. He reserved the victim's head and genitalia and acetone and stored them in a wooden box. On May 23rd, 1989, Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction with work release permitted in order that he be able to keep his job. He was also required to register as a sex offender. Y'all, this gets messy. This gets messy. On May 14th, 1990, Dahmer moved into a new apartment. Within 1 week of that, he killed his 6th victim, a 32-year-old male prostitute. 1 week after the murder of a 6th victim, Dahmer lured another young man to his apartment. Dahmer accidentally consumed the drink laden with sedatives. Serves him right. Hi. And when he awoke the following day, he discovered his intended victim had stolen several items of his clothing, $300, and a watch. And in all honesty, couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Totally deserved it in my book. 100%. Dahmer never reported the incident to the police, because, I mean, what are you going to say? Hi, 911, I was trying to kill somebody, and they stole from me instead. It's not really a police call you can make, right? Dahmer never reported this incident to the police, although on May 29th, he divulged to his probation officer that he had been robbed. In June of 1990, Dahmer lured a 27-year-old acquaintance to his apartment. He drugged and strangled him. He placed his skull in his freezer in hopes that it would not retain moisture. Freezing the skeleton did not remove moisture, and the skeleton of his victim would be acidified within months. It's horrible. It's just horrible. Dahmer accidentally destroyed the skull when he placed it in the oven to dry, a process that caused the skull to explode. I don't really know what you would have to be thinking to be like, first of all, to kill somebody and preserve their freaking head in your freezer, but then to be like, you know, I could fix this. Let me put it in the oven. Like, that's just basic science. I feel like that's just not going to work out. Obviously it didn't, but... Second, sorry. Eyeliners hard to do and talk at the same time. So, freezing... Oh, I already read that part. Damn, I'm sucking today. Less than 3 months later, Dahmer encountered a 22-year-old Chicago native outside a bookstore. The victim agreed to accompany Dahmer to his apartment for $50 and further agreed to allow him to listen to his heart and stomach. The things that, like, I've never never been a prostitute. I've never hired a prostitute. I don't plan on it. But I just would love to have heard the conversation that went, I'll pay you $50 if you just let me listen to your heart. To me, that just sounds sketchy. When Dahmer attempted to perform oral sex upon the victim, he was informed, that'll cost you extra. So, as per usual, he fed him sedatives and strangled him and murdered him and dismembered him. In this case, he painted and coated the skull with enamel to help preserve them, and he would continue to do this on future victims. It's horrible. This is just a horrible story. Okay, 3 weeks after this murder, on September 24th, Dahmer encountered a 22-year-old man at the Grand Avenue Mall and persuaded him to return to his apartment for a few drinks with additional money on offer if he would pose for photographs. For some reason, that sentence did not make sense to me. He was not attracted to him, but strangled him and dismembered him anyway, although he kept no body parts. Like, what was the point of that? You didn't even like the guy, but you're like, you know what? You can be added to the list too. Why not? Like, it's just fucked up. I mean, it's fucked up regardless, but didn't even like the guy, so what was the fucking purpose of that? I just threw the brush down here that I needed still, because I'm special like that. So, following this murder, he didn't kill anyone for 5 months. Like, way to go, Jeff. You didn't fuck up for 5 months. And then you fucked up, and you fucked up big. February 1991, he murdered a 17-year-old boy. 2 months later, on April 7th, he murdered a 19-year-old. Dahmer lured him to his apartment where he drugged him, drilled a hole in his skull, and poured hydrochloric acid into it. This is new. This is not something he did on any of the other victims. It was just this guy that he started it with. Not really sure why. I mean, I am sure why. But his idea basically was to control or to create a sex slave that he had complete control over because his brain was essentially fried by pouring acid into it. It's kind of similar, like he kind of similarly was performing, I guess, oh, that looks good, a chemical lobotomy in a way. If you don't know what a lobotomy is, it's basically cutting open the brain and like doing shit to it to make it, to fix somebody is what it's supposed to be. Look up the Kennedys. They did it to their daughter Rosemary. Because, good job, Kennedys. According to Dahmer, the victim woke up during this experiment and said, I have a headache. What time is it? Dahmer drugged him again and strangled him and decapitated him for fear that essentially he would remember basically what had happened to him and he would turn him in. So he was like, oh, yep, we can't keep this guy. We're going to have to kill this one because he knows too much. I mean, what were you going to do? Just pour hydrochloric acid into their brain every 6 weeks or something? I mean, I can't imagine that would last forever. And eventually it would probably kill them, you would think, because strong. But then again, what do I do? I haven't ever murdered anybody. So, by 1991, residents of the Oxford apartment had repeatedly complained to the building's manager of the foul smells coming from Dahmer's apartment, in addition to the sounds of falling objects and the occasional sound of a chainsaw. Now, he originally said, like, his response to these complaints were that, oh, his freezer broke and everything inside of it spoiled. And then the next time it was, oh, all of my tropical fish died and I haven't gotten around to cleaning out the tank. I've had a dead fish before. And for some reason, I just feel like that probably would not smell the same as, like, a decomposing body. But, I mean, what the fuck do I know? I've never spent time with a body that was decomposing. So I can't genuinely answer that question, but I feel like it would be two different smells. Because one's aquatic and one's human. Does that make sense? 2 months later on, oh shit, wow, okay. skipped a whole paragraph there. On May 26, 1991, Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old Lau, I believe is how you say it, teenager. He was the younger brother. It was ironic because he was the younger brother of the victim he had molested in 1988 that he was arrested for. So he was like the younger brother of that same kid, and it's wild. In the early morning hours of May 27th, Dahmer returned toward his apartment, to discover the child sitting naked on the corner of 25th and State, talking in a layout with 3 distressed young women standing near him. They called 911. This could have all ended here. They called 911. And this is important because they show up. Dahmer says, oh, that's just my 19-year-old lover. You can't tell me this kid didn't look like he was probably 13 years old. Because, he was. And they were like, oh, okay. They told the women that were like adamant that something wasn't right to butt out. He let them up into his apartment. And it is super important to note that there is a literal dead body on his bedroom floor rotting. And so he's like, okay, well, you can come up to the apartment and make sure that everything's okay, right? So they go up to the apartment. They're like, oh, what's that smell? And he was like, oh, my tropical fish died. And then he said, like, the officer, like, went into, like, so, like, the room is here, like, say the bedroom is here, and there's this, like, hallway here, and then, like, he's peeking into the bedroom, but he didn't, like, really look around at anything. He's just looking in, like, peeking in to make sure that nothing's off. But even with the lights off, you'd think there would be, like, some sort of, like, distinct shape on the floor in the form of a body. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should turn off the lights and lay on the floor and see if anybody would notice. But I feel like there would be, like, some form of, like, shape or shadow. But apparently they noticed nothing. And then they left and were like, whatever, take good care of your boyfriend. But they felt stupid later. They just completely dismissed the matter, basically. On June 30th, he murdered a 20-year-old. On July 5th, Dahmer murdered a 23-year-old man. On July 14th, he murdered a 24-year-old man. And on July 19th, Dahmer was fired from his job. Now, it doesn't really say why he was fired from his job. I'm going to assume that because he was so busy killing all these people, he just didn't go to work. And from what I've read of his past, I would fully believe that because he just did not seem like the very motivated, top-notch type. Dude, you're crushing my papers, but it's okay. I don't need them. Go away. It's my cat, sorry. Dahmer murdered a 25-year-old man the same night as receiving the news that he had been fired. On July 22nd, 1991, a 32-year-old man agreed to accompany him to his apartment. At 11:30 p.m. that night, his intended victim knocked him out and flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers that were nearby. Thank you for the likes. Officer Mueller found a large knife and scores of Polaroid pictures. And it was like one of those like old school cameras that like you take the pictures and the picture just immediately pops out of like the bottom. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like this big square camera and it has this little thing at the bottom that like when you take the picture it just immediately pops out the bottom. And then like you do this with it and then the picture appears slowly. Older people will know what I'm talking about. There was like just tons of those, and many of which showed human bodies in various stages of dismemberment. They also found 4 severed heads in Dahmer's kitchen. A total of 7 skulls, some painted, some bleached, were found in his bedroom and inside a closet, because that seems like the place you should store those, I guess. They found 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle in his fridge, and in the freezer discovered an entire torso, a bag of human organs and flesh. Elsewhere, they found 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved penises, a mummified scalp, and in the 57-gallon drum that he apparently just had stored in his room, because, look that. I mean, like, again, nobody asked questions, apparently, in the 70s. 3 dismembered torsos were dissolving in an acid solution. A total of 74 Polaroid pictures detailing the dismemberment of his victims were found. Dahmer confessed over a number of interviews, which totaled over 60 hours, that he had murdered 16 young men in Wisconsin since 1987, with one further victim in 1978. Now, I find it very important to mention this because he is known as a cannibal. I could not find a single article that said that he actually ate his victims. I could not find anything to verify that. But I mean, obviously, it must have happened or they wouldn't have called him a cannibal. But I just couldn't find anything that stated when he started that or if he even did it. I just couldn't find anything to back that up. On July 25th, 1991, Dahmer was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, he had been charged with a further 11. He had been charged further with 11 more counts. Jesus, I cannot speak today. On September 14th, investigators in Ohio, my cat, uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in woodlands behind the address in which Dahmer had confessed to killing his first victim. He was formally identified by 2 molars and a vertebrae with x-ray records. 3 days later, he was charged in Ohio. Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. Now, as I said, it is very important to remember that he was found sane. He was found sane. They went through all the things they were supposed to do, and he was found sane. So he wasn't crazy. He was just an ass. On the morning of November 28th, 1994, Dahmer left his cell to conduct his assigned work detail within the jail. Accompanying him were 2 fellow inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. The trio were left unsupervised in the showers of the prison gym for about 20 minutes. At about 8:10 a.m., Dahmer was discovered on the floor of the bathroom of the gym suffering from extreme head wounds. He had been bludgeoned with a 20-inch metal bar. Dahmer was still alive and was rushed to a nearby hospital, but was pronounced dead an hour later. Anderson had also been beaten and died 2 days later from his wounds. Dahmer had stated in his will that he wished for no service and that he wanted to be cremated. Fuck you, Dahmer. Shouldn't have gotten anything you wanted. The Oxford apartments were demolished in November of 1992. It is now a vacant lot. Lionel Dahmer is retired and now lives with his second wife, Sherry. Both have refused to change their surname and have professed their love of Dahmer in spite of his crimes. In 1994, Lionel published a book, A Father's Story. Hold on, let me do my lip real quick. Yeah, he wrote a book. He was sued by 2 of the families. He wrote a book, A Father's Story. It was published and donated a portion of the proceeds to the victims' families. He was sued by 2 of the families for using their names in a book without obtaining prior consent. And a 3rd family filed a wrongful death suit against Lionel, Sherry, and the former wife, Joyce, citing parental negligence was as the cause for the claim. Joyce Flint died of cancer in November 2000. Dahmer's should not be allowed to speak. Okay. Younger brother David changed his surname and lives in anonymity, which, I mean, I would too. So that's the story of Jeffrey Dahmer and his crimes, for lack of a better term, I guess. It's really effed up, but it was interesting to me that he was called a cannibal, and yet I couldn't find anything to, say definitively that he was in fact a cannibal. I couldn't find any evidence to back that up. And we all know how I feel about presenting facts that don't have evidence, but he was labeled a cannibal, so I'm guessing there must be some proof somewhere, and maybe it just wasn't put on the internet. I don't know. I couldn't find anything to verify that. But thank you for joining me on this lovely Friday for True Crime and Makeup. I will see you all next Friday. We are doing the Hello Kitty case. I hope to see you then. Have a wonderful day. Make good choices. Stay away from people that creep you out. And remember, no means no. Okay. Have a wonderful day. Bye.